are you?
Hi,
How are you?
how are you?
Fine, thank you. I'm Sandra. I'm really happy to see you today.
Pleasure to see you and meet you as well.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if you agree, let's begin.
Okay, terrific.
There are so many aspects to be considered in teachers training, but what is the main focus to approach the issue right now? I mean, what must education faculties be thinking about nowadays?
So I think that there are, as you said, so many different aspects to preparing teachers for the complexities of the classroom. Right now, I think one of the primary focuses is one, how to ensure that we're actually preparing teachers to enact some of those practices that help students learn. So the move from reflection and planning to issues of enactment and helping beginning teachers learn how to try out many new approaches to teaching. So that's related to the shift towards more practice-based teacher education. That has been a big focus, both in the United States, but really around the world. Coupled with that is the importance of helping prospective teachers grapple with issues of equity and justice in their classrooms. How do you equip teachers to, again, set all students up for success, to address some of the issues related to racial injustice that have been, again, prevalent across the world, and making sure that teachers are well prepared. So I think these two foci on helping students focus more on practice, but also helping them grapple with issues of equity and justice in their classrooms.
I guess to define the new constellation of skills that teachers should possess, we need to clarify first curricular goals, right?
Yes. So I think that, again, teacher preparation is hampered by the fact that there often isn't a common curriculum that we're preparing teachers around or a common instructional vision. So I think that having a clear instructional vision that guides both curriculum and instruction is one of the most helpful things in preparing teachers, knowing that we have a sense of the goals we're heading towards. So is that to prepare teachers for more student-centered, project-based learning classrooms? Is to prepare students to, again, have more agency and ownership over their learning? That will affect how we prepare teachers. So I think that not only the curricular goals, but that instructional vision should help direct teacher education.
Okay. There is kind of consensus in thinking education should enable people not to answer tests, but to find the purpose of their lives and live in harmony with people of diverse backgrounds and interests in society. Do you agree with this statement, I guess?
Absolutely. I think right now what we're hoping to do is to prepare teachers for a broader set of goals for young people, not only around academic learning, but also social emotional learning, civic learning, again, issues around equity and justice and how to work with people who come from different backgrounds. I really think we have an ambitious set of learning goals that go well beyond academic learning right now if people are to be successful in the world of the future. And I think the pandemic has made that absolutely clear that we are an interdependent world and we need to prepare students to be a part of that complex interdependent world.
Yeah. Okay, but does it suppose a flexible education approach?
I think it depends on what you mean by flexible. I think what it means is that we really need to be thinking of that expanded set of goals for young people and then preparing teachers for the practices that support those goals. So we are just finished a book on core practices for project-based learning that are organized around 4 goals. Goals around disciplinary learning, goals around authenticity, goals around agency and ownership of students over their learning, And those goals then are related to a set of practices. So again, what we're finding is that teachers have those expanded set of goals for young people. That's very important. That's a mindset that they bring into teaching that will help them be successful. But along with those goals, they need the practices that help them reach those goals. And so again, that's the model that I think I use as part of the definition for practice-based teacher education. Is again helping people develop the set of practices that go along with our expanded set of goals around student learning.
In that context, and according to your experience, what are the main needs in teachers training today?
As I said, I think focusing on a more practice-based curriculum, which again a number of universities are trying out, that really supports new teachers to begin to try out and develop a set of practices that will help them be successful in the classroom, while also helping them think about their goals around equity and justice in that context. It's that intersection. And that's been very hard to develop in teacher education. We often sort of do one or the other, and I think what we're aiming at right now is doing both. Similarly, I think really thinking hard about what it means to prepare teachers to develop students' own agency and ownership over their own learning. So many students are used to being told what to do, and most teachers have grown up in a system where teachers told them what to do. So how do you really prepare them to do something radically different? How do you help them make tweaks in their practice that move towards greater ownership with students and around their own learning?
Yeah, in that sense, what are the most remarkable pedagogies you have found with the Core Practice Consortium, and why do they succeed?
Again, I think that part of the focus of that group was trying to move it exactly in this direction of trying to think about what does it mean to identify a set of practices that beginning teachers might need to be successful in achieving ambitious learning goals for students. And then really providing the opportunity within the teacher education classroom for students to investigate those practices by watching more experienced teachers do them, trying out those practices, first of all, in safer settings like the teacher ed classroom before actually trying that out with young people, and then getting really high quality feedback around what they're doing. So I think that what was helpful around the consortium is that it enabled teacher educators to get together and to share their own practice, to watch videos of each other, to make their own practice more public, so that we could have a better understanding of what does this look like. I think we talk a lot about the practice of K-12 teachers and making that more public, while the practice of teacher educators is often not very visible. So I think part of the opportunity of the Core Practice Consortium and other groups like it is to really kind of talk to colleagues about what this work entails. It's not easy. Teaching K-12 is not easy. Teaching teachers is not easy. And having colleagues with whom you can work and share your struggles and get feedback, I think is just an enormous opportunity in teacher education.
So you think a lot of authentic practice, reflection after sessions, and peer teachers advisory could go a long way to easy and improve teachers' education? That's right.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. It is a lot about pedagogical techniques and classroom management, but we cannot deny visuality came to stay somehow. So blending learning will emerge as the new pedagogical normal. What does it suppose in teachers' training domain?
I think this is such an interesting question, and you're right. We're now at a moment where we need to make sure that all of our teachers also have an understanding of what it means to teach online. Well, one of the things that we found in preparing our own faculty for online teaching is good online teaching rests on good in-person teaching, knowing how to plan, knowing how to think about small group instruction was at the heart of our ability to kind of create very strong interactive online classes, right? If you were a good in-person teacher, you could leverage some of that. But what does that look like online? I was actually teaching for the first time in my entire career this fall online. And I was so worried about the technology. You know, I went to all of the workshops. I learned how to use Padlet, which is a way to poll people and people can write on it. I learned how to use the poll everywhere. I learned how to use Zoom. I really was focused on the technology. But when it came right down to it, what I depended on was my many, many years of teaching and knowing how do you build relationships with students. It's a little different online. We had to create additional opportunities to get to know students, but it was still building relationships. I trusted my own understanding of how to lead classroom discussions and how to provoke good classroom discussions. I depended on my own understanding of how to develop small group work. I've always done a lot of small group work. Now I just use breakout rooms. But the principles of how to design good breakout rooms really built on what I had done in person. And on my first day of online teaching, I was so kind of impressed and surprised by the fact that it wasn't about the technology at all. It was really about all the things that characterize teaching in person, of getting to know the students, establishing a classroom culture, creating routines for how we would work together, diving into the content. So I do think we have to help people understand how to use more tools for teaching technology, teaching with technology and teaching remotely. I think more classrooms in the future will be hybrid in some ways, but I think it still rests when I think about preparing beginning teachers on this solid foundation of practices that define high quality teaching, and then moving from there.
Yeah, as you say, teachers will need to be able to work not only for planning physical classes, as well as developing the online content, but also in synchronizing both of them. Are education faculties ready to face that challenge in growing up the next teachers' generation?
Yes, absolutely. Again, I was wondering what field experience would look like in a virtual world, because we know that so much a part of teacher education is the experiences in classrooms and what students learn from working with teachers in classroom settings. And these, of course, were all virtual this year. But I was amazed at how, for example, at Penn GSE, we created a virtual experience with the Free Library of Philadelphia. So our elementary school teachers ran classes in reading, in math, and in makerspaces for kids in Philadelphia at no cost. So this was a free program for them online. And they did online read alouds. They did various kinds of math routines with kids and math projects. They created things with kids, all online, all in the virtual space. And the students talked about how much they learned, both about teaching, but also about teaching online in those settings. So I think that, again, this will be potentially a revolution for rural teachers, for teachers, for whom kids, we're rethinking snow days. Do you really lose school when kids are home because of snow in the United States, or do you work in a virtual setting? Again, what I'll say is how successful teachers were with remote teaching, I'm guessing, depended on how strong of teachers they were to start with, and to the extent to which they had prepared students to be more self-directed learners. So for example, in Philadelphia, many of our partners work in schools that are more project-based, and they had already spent time working with kids to be responsible for their own learning and working independently and in small groups. And that transferred very well into the remote setting because they already had those skills. It's harder when the kids are, again, completely dependent on the teacher and you're not seeing the teacher as much.
Yes, you're right. And on the other hand, as you said before, it's a priority in the agenda to innovate pedagogies to promote peace, human rights, and sustainable development. How are you working for that at Penn GSE faculty?
I think this is something that Penn GSE cares deeply about, is, again, how do we prepare young people to work for a more just, equitable, and peaceful world. The UN sustainable goals around sustainability, again, are sort of guidelines in many of our programs. So I think, again, partly it is helping teachers understand their broader role, that it is not just about preparing kids to do multiplication. It's also preparing them to learn how to work together, to work with students who are different from themselves, to see themselves as civic actors working for their communities, to empower them as citizens moving forward. So again, it goes back to our earlier conversation about that expanded set of goals that we have for learners, and then the responsibility of teacher educators to make sure that teachers are prepared to support students towards meeting those goals.
Motivate students to achieve the next level of participation and action in taking in their own context is probably the most important competence teachers should develop to increase its opportunities to be designers of their own lives. How to enhance this kind of commitment in education faculties?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we've been investing in is professional development around project-based learning. There's been a lot of interest, again, not just in the United States, but globally, around moving towards more student-centered pedagogies that, again, empower students in the ways we've been discussing. And project-based learning is one of those ways. We've been working with the Lucas Education Research Foundation that sponsored research in this area and has developed a number of curricula that use project-based learning, again, towards that expanded set of goals. And we know that it takes a lot of emphasis on teachers' own learning to be successful in this area. One of the things I often talk about is that we're always attracted by the goals of student-centered learning and project-based learning. And so we periodically invest in them, but we don't invest in teacher learning around them. And they're very complex pedagogies. They're challenging. And so we really need to invest in supporting teachers to learn these over time. The book that I just mentioned is related to that. We have a certificate program at Penn GSE on project-based learning that is a 2-year program to really support teachers to develop those practices over time. We've identified those core practices that underlie more project-based learning. And again, encourage teachers to try them out, to work with others to try them out, to get feedback. This is a long-term project. It's not, we're not going to transform classrooms overnight. But how do we stick with this to really make sure that teachers have the opportunity to deepen their own learning in this area and to move their practice in this area? And that really will take the whole system to support that.
That is so great. Okay, so what can we call excellence in teaching today?
So I think a lot of what I've been saying is excellence in teaching is, again, one, a commitment to an expanded set of learning goals for young people, a real belief in students' capacity to be creative, to be capable. These are the mindsets in many ways that underlie excellence in teaching. At the same time, we need a set of teachers to be effective in helping students achieve those goals in the classroom. And that involves really, supporting young people to take more responsibility for their own learning, to create more opportunities for deep disciplinary learning in classrooms, and to support, again, the collaboration in the classroom, to really help young people develop the kind of collaborative skills that will serve them in good stead. The teachers to do that, excellence in teaching also is how they interact with colleagues. Again, teaching is not an individual act. It is really a collective act. And the more that we can invest in teachers' learning communities, opportunities for teachers to learn from one another, learn with one another, to support one another's teaching, the better off we'll be.
Yeah, true. Being a teacher is to be finally an inspirational figure, and that competence can be measured through knowledge and skill, but especially through values and attitudes. Can be values and attitudes be educational subjects of teachers' training programs?
Yes, I think I've been really focused on how teacher education to support both the knowledge and the skills that teachers need. Too often we focus on one or the other, but we really need, these are really a part of what it means to be an effective teacher. And coupled with that are these commitments around equity, around supporting students' agency and responsibility, and again, around supporting these broader goals for the future. So I think these are things that we can both cultivate in teacher education and support in teachers' career. We need to get better at how do we assess if teachers are successful in achieving those goals. Right now in the United States, we've been very dependent on standardized tests for measuring teachers' effectiveness. And the standardized tests don't necessarily capture some of the things we've been talking about today. They're not capturing to what extent students are learning to collaborate with one another. How could we capture that in other kinds of assessments and measurements? How do we capture whether or not students have a sense of agency and ownership over their own learning? Some of that will involve asking students themselves. Some of that comes through teacher observation, really observing in classrooms. The quality of classroom discussion in and of itself says a lot about the strengths of teachers. So I think as we support this expanded set of goals, we also need to think about how do we develop new lower stakes measurements that help teachers look in the mirror and see where am I now and how can I improve, and help leaders use those tools to again support teacher learning over time.
Okay. For education to be pertinent, it is necessary to take account of local context in knowledge building, but also teachers must find a way to find local, global citizenship. What tools do they need to combine both aspects in students' perspective?
No, I think that this is one of the reasons that professional education is so important, is both helping teachers develop, again, a more global understanding of what constitutes highly effective teaching practice. And much of that, I mean, in all of my travels across the world, I've seen how much commonality there is in this. Right now, one of the observation tools that I developed called Plato is being used in Nordic countries. And they talk about how helpful it's been for the teachers. I just was talking to a group of Swedish teachers the other day about how much they like the elements of Plato as a language of practice, as a grammar of practice that they can use to talk about their teaching with. At the same time, teaching is all about the particularities and the local context, the local cultures, being responsive to the cultures that students bring to the classroom, getting to know the students, their families, and the communities, and then tailoring practice to be responsive to those. So I think we're always moving from the local to the global in teacher education, making sure that as we work towards some of these more global elements, we're always helping teachers be attentive and responsive to the local communities from which their students come.
Okay, that's the message. So I think this is all. Thank you very much for being here with me. Okay, I think Carlos will notify you when the publication is ready.
Sandra, will you be sharing a draft of the piece beforehand so I can look at it and make sure it captures accurately?
Sure, of course, but it is going to be in Spanish, so I don't know, is it okay for you?
Yeah, I read Spanish more or less, and I can get some help.
Okay, of course, then I'll send it to you. I promise.
Okay, that would be great.
Okay. Thank you very much. Please take care and keep working the way you do because it is very valuable for our education community around the world. So,
Great. Thank you so much. Take good care.
okay. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.